E3 is come and gone, and this year had a pretty solid show overall. On the mainstream side of things, we got 2 new Metroid games, an awesome new Mario game, Microsoft hitting hard with 4K, 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 and a brand new Ori game. Mario and Rabbids actually looks amazing, and holy sh**, this is actually happening. No gameplay, but it's happening, and that's great! But that's not why you clicked on this video, of course, as there were tons of indie games to show. The usual suspects at the Devolver Digital tent, Indiecade, the Media Indie Exchange, and Microsoft had a ton of projects to show off, and this year, I'm gearing up for multiple videos just like last year. And before anyone asks, Cuphead wasn't playable on the show floor this year, but let's be real, chances are you're already getting Cuphead. So, a few disclaimers. First, I've had a chance to play every single game featured in this video. Nothing here is just from a presentation, and I got a chance to experience hands-on time with everything. And second, none of the games I have to show off have been fully released yet. They're in various stages of development, some coming out soon and others still early, so gameplay and features may change over time. Hype with caution. About 2 years ago, Montreal-based indie developers at the newly formed Thunder Lotus Games put out Jotun, an exploration action game featuring really impressive hand-drawn animation. Now 2 years later, that same team is almost ready to premiere their follow-up with Sundered, an action Metroidvania with procedural generation featuring the developers' high standards for hand-drawn animation. For this preview, I was invited to the most recent closed beta of the game. You'll be exploring a wide open area, complete with a minimap to guide you towards different locations, and through that you'll find different power-ups like a double jump or a weapon to unlock new areas in the map. While there are sections of the map that stay the same for shortcuts, boss battles, or areas to unlock, most of the map is procedurally generated to offer a new layout every time that you die. The animation in Jotun was at a high level, and Sundered shares those standards for providing smooth and detailed hand-drawn sprites and areas to explore. The animation has influences from Don Bluth, in case you couldn't tell by all the gruesome death animations the game has. You'll be fighting most enemies with melee attacks, and you can freely jump and dodge enemies while giving you both a rechargeable shield and body health to maintain. Enemies appear mostly at random at any time while you're exploring, and sometimes it'll be a Zerg rush coming at you at once where you have to fight off a huge horde. The randomness of the enemy spawns do make the game challenging and unpredictable. Although I can see players being a bit annoyed with this feature, where they'll be off to get something done, only to have a bunch of goons show up that want to blast you into oblivion that you'll have to first take care of. The boss fights in the game offer a balanced challenge here, giving a lot of variety between the sub-bosses, from the flyers to the ground-based monsters, and especially the bigger bosses, which are appropriately challenging in the beta. I really enjoyed the variety of the attacks in the seated giant fight. The game is very far along right now and is expected to be released this month. The game is still in beta and ironing out its issues, but having faced all the bosses and going through the maze, I'm interested to see just how deep this rabbit hole goes. At E3, even though it opened itself up to the public and it sold out with tickets, the gaming community, and especially the indie development community, knows that this is an exclusive event. Many independent game developers can't afford a space unless they're accepted into an organization like Microsoft or Indiecade, and sometimes big companies won't give them the space to show off their games, despite being on their platform. So this year, I wanted to start a bit of a tradition with these E3 videos by showing off a game that wasn't at the show. And I couldn't think of a more deserving or appropriate entry to show it off than Lucah. It's a dark action game taking place in this sketchy, brooding world where you'll explore a mystical, nightmarish land fighting monsters and gaining new abilities. You'll have 2 melee attacks in the beginning for light and heavy attacks, and a robot friend that can fire projectiles. Combat here is fast-paced and encourages variety by having your ammunition fill up with each successful hit, and your stamina bar lets you take a break from melee to go back to shooting. I played the early alpha build, and it runs at a smooth and consistent 60 frames per second, and the control felt very responsive where it was my own fault for dying. It will also feature a nice variety of customizability with your combos, by having different styles of melee combat varying in range that can be switched on the fly. I really dig the minimal, glitchy, sketchy characters and the look of the world, and the dark mystery sets a good tone to make me want to explore more and discover what the world is all about. It comes from a small team of developers with various roles, and was inspired by a combat system that designer Colin Horgan created in a prototype with a dark, minimal style. There's a small sense that it's a very personal project for Horton, as the game contains Judeo-Christian nods and influences, and he was raised Catholic. He sought to create an interesting contrast between the familiar and the unfamiliar as explored in a horror tone. The version that I played is available right now for free for anybody to download, and the game is currently running a Kickstarter campaign, although it's only got a few days left, so I'm crossing my fingers that it'll make it to the finish line. The demo is an alpha and will be a bit rough in terms of polish, but come on, free demo! I'm hoping that Looka will make its Kickstarter goal this week. It's a game with a lot of promise, a creepy and signature tone, and a simple but engaging combat system. It's a nightmare to look out for.
Welcome to the Kingsway Operating System Video Guide.
This is a bit of a tangent, but let me explain what it's like to be a video editor for a moment. I sit around tinkering with programs and downloading bars while managing another window full of other bars happening, so I can go and manage other bars that are conforming, downloading, rendering, and processing in the background, trying to perfect what I'm doing with a customizable interface to make sure all the work's done, so I'm not staying up until 2 in the morning waiting for other progress bars to finish. So you can only imagine how much of a weird existential crisis Kingsway is for me to play. It's an RPG that's played on an old Windows 3.1 interface. You're given small windows like your email giving you quests, your stats where you can equip yourself, your supplies, and your map screen. When moving on a different area on a map screen, a progress bar window pops up, and it'll stop that progress when you have a battle with an enemy popping up in another window. And it doesn't just stay put either, as you'll have to move the mouse to hit the attack button at the right time, or to do any other commands like defending. The window interface here is a crazy clever idea, as it gives a lot of inspired moments in battle. How the progress bars are affected by both your moves and the enemy's moves, how different multiple enemies can have different windows that you'll have to balance. If there's an object being thrown at you, another pop-up window shows up, and you'll have to click it quickly to avoid the attack. You can even adjust the settings on the interface for a different color and mouse cursor. The game has a solid risk versus reward system of many classic RPG tropes, like having to decide to avoid random people or bandits in the world, or choosing to help them out where it could lead to treasure or an early grave. You'll be given different quests as you explore more and more of the world, and admittedly on the surface it's a pretty standard RPG without an enormous amount of depth, but the Windows interface gives a fresh perspective on the idea, and it had me laughing the whole way through. It's a pretty tough game as well to manage and attack against different baddies, but each time that you die, you can use your gems to beef up your character and get stronger for the next run. Andrew Morich is the developer behind this one, who's done previous Adult Swim games such as Super Puzzle Platformer Deluxe, and it's pretty impressive for a one-person developer, especially with how different this one is to his previous game. This might be the video editor in me getting a special feeling of using my Adobe Premiere skills to the test here, but it's one I can easily recommend that you keep your eyes on. One of the most clever games of E3, and I'm interested to see what else it does with the concept. This next one's for any fans of Bayonetta, Devil May Cry, or God of War out there who felt that those games needed to be a board game with management elements. Well, okay, you may not think that's a great idea, but it comes together really well with Aztez, a 2.5D beat-em-up style game where half of it takes place in a board game setup. You control different characters called Aztez, and you build and maintain your empire with resource management and lots and lots and lots of violence. The first half of the game takes place on a grid where you can use your resources to open up new areas of the map and claiming nearby cities to grow your domain. From here, you can select a different number of missions, each having their own set of winning and losing consequences. Once you select the mission, you go into the second half of the gameplay, which is the 2.5D beat-em-up. You have both quick and strong attacks, where you can jump up and attack enemies, as well as parries, counters, and grabbing abilities to destroy a wide range of different foes, each having their own unique attack patterns and ways to take them out. It all runs at a solid 60 frames per second, which is something that you really need for this type of game, and the controls are responsive and tight. There's a lot of nice risk versus reward systems in place, such as bonus objectives for the separate stages, and your performance helps the board game aspect to get extra resources in order to get an extra life so you can take it on multiple missions on one turn. You see, you only get one guy to start off a new game and to go into new missions, and if he dies in most of them, then you'll have to start the board game all over again. The combat also has a nifty blood feature where if you take your time and consume a certain amount of blood, you can transform and give a super powerful god attack, giving a nice amount of damage. I had a great time with the game, as the board element had me thinking and planning ahead with such dangers as territory going into descent, where it could do harm to my surrounding cities, and planning out how to defend against it. And the gameplay is well balanced here, where we'll have different difficulty settings to appeal to those with various skill levels. Aztez is a game I didn't know a whole lot about going into it, and I walked away highly impressed with Team Colorblind's efforts creating what can be described as a hack and strategy game. If you're hankering for a unique hack and slash to tide you over until a new Bayonetta drops, Aztez is absolutely a game worth looking into when it's released this summer. Hope you have a bloodlust. There are a lot of reasons for me to get interested in a puzzle game these days. If it has an interesting story, good-looking art style, or unique gameplay mechanics, then it's got a good shot at catching my attention. This next short game does a bit of all three, and I'm certainly not the only person who's noticed. BestLuck comes from developer Jae-hyun Yo, whose background isn't initially in game design, but originally in visual effects for feature films, but wanted to dive into interactive entertainment. With BestLuck, he sought in creating a unique atmosphere to create a creepy but romantic tone. It fits well here in the context of a dream that feels like a first date in an episode of The Twilight Zone, only with less ending twists and no cigarette smoke. The main shtick here is that you're inside your own dream and are always being followed by a girl pointing in a certain direction. Going to where she's going will lead you towards a puzzle involving a series of doors. Basically, the camera is fixed on this position, and you'll have to move around the space to position the camera to see hidden objects hidden inside the doorway view. You'll then have to figure out the right sequence to open the doors and solve the puzzle that it's presenting, here figuring out what the rules of the specific puzzle are. The game and story are fairly straightforward so far in the demo, with some nice potential to show off a simple but effective mystery involving the floating woman. The only issue is that the frame rate did chug a bit, but again, it is at an early state, and it may be by computer's specs. The game so far has a bit of a pattern of finding different objects scattered throughout the dream world. That opens up a bit of story in between puzzles, then solving the puzzles, then finding more objects, solving puzzles, seeing a little animated story, and solving more puzzles again. I could see people finding the structure a bit repetitive, but it wasn't enough to take me out of the experience. The final game is intended to be very short, clocking in at about 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes according to the developer. If this game does look interesting to you, the demo is available right now on itch.io for free. It'll only take about 30 minutes to play through, so why the hell not? Go download that. The game is very close to completion and is expected to be released this summer. Interested to see where the story goes. While you may have to wait a bit to play this year's selection of fighting games that were shown off, like Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and the surprisingly good-looking Dragon Ball FighterZ, you won't have to wait long for the anticipated sequel from Mesoff in Nidhogg II. The first game featured a sort of Neo-Atari 2600 look with blocky characters, whereas the sequel has a sort of weird pixel art aesthetic. No one doubts that it'll be a fun game to play, but fans were none too kind over the makeover that the sequel was receiving. While Monkey Homer won't be the only character that you play, this art style won't be everybody's cup of tea, and I doubt anything that I say will be able to change your mind over the character design. Admittedly, when I first saw the trailer, I had my doubts as well, but in playing the game, I didn't mind the art style at all. The sound design really sells those kills, and the frame rate felt solid and locked upon playing it at the show, so there's no slowdown or poor control upon my playthrough. There's a level where you're walking over hot coals fighting each other, and in real life, the developers walked over hot coals to test out how the mechanics of the game would work. Say what you will about the art style here, but literal pain and sweat went into the creation of the game. There'll be a few new additional game modes as well as features from the first game, like a single-player arcade mode, local multiplayer, local tournaments, online matchmaking, and invites, as well as a few other variants like a special challenge mode in single-player. But the bigger addition to the mix is the inclusion of new weapons besides the fencing sword. Some of the single player levels will be designed to teach you how to use these different weapons, and they'll come in handy. They're designed to have their own unique advantages and disadvantages, like ones that can block arrows and ones which cannot. If you're a fan of the first game, then I'm happy to report that the sequel has the same fast-paced tug-of-war balance of trying to get past your opponent that made the first game a now classic title. The controls are responsive, weapons give a lot of variety to the game, and it's just as funny when you both end up dying on the same screen. If you can get over the look of the game, then Nidhogg II will be just as much of a blast as the first game and will be out sometime this summer. Oh, and for the record, a game where Monkey Homer Simpsons fighting each other with swords sounds frickin' delightful.
Midnight.
Come and be amazed at the Metronomicon, an action RPG where you use heals, spells, and attacks similar to a JRPG, where you activate them going through a rock band style track. How it works is that a baddie is in front of you and the music will start playing automatically. You move your cursor over to a character's ability, and once you're ready, you start dancing through until you've reached the point where it activates the said ability. Then that move will have a cooldown period for you to select another character and activate another ability the same way. All the characters have their specific abilities in order to use them, and you can sort them to get more powerful attacks, such as doing double grooving to activate a second ability, leading to a more powerful result. The idea is that you don't have a lot of time to take out your enemy, so you'll have to move between your abilities fairly quickly while maintaining your party's HP. It's admittedly a bit tricky to do, with how you'll mostly be focusing on your notes to pay attention to everything else that's on screen, such as the enemy's weaknesses. The game will also have a lot of different items and boosts that can help out your characters during different fights, bringing in more RPG elements. The song list here is extensive, with different talents like DJ Cutman and Megaran offering mostly techno music. Now of course music taste is very subjective, but it all fits with the dance club look very well in the game. But if you're a little bit too much of a snob, there's actually a patch where you can import your own music into the game and play levels based on that. Originally, the game was a single-player affair where one person controlled everything, but at E3 I saw a brand new feature: multiplayer. Here, two people control the same team, and one person activates one ability, while the second can work on a different character. It's a neat addition that I was hoping the team would look into, along with the added bonus of being able to play with a Guitar Hero controller or a dance pad. It's a neat little bonus to have, where if you have the PC version of it now, you can actually use a dance pad or Guitar Hero controller to play. The PC version is out right now, and the game will be heading to the PS4 and Xbox One this summer, including a new expansion with a new playable hero, multiplayer, and more. If you already got the game on the PC, the expansion will come in a free update. While the $20 asking price might be a bit hefty for the game at first glance, the amount of challenge and content here is pretty extensive. I played about 3 hours of the game, and I felt like I've only scratched the surface of everything that there is to play. If you're up for a ridiculous and unique take on JRPGs, the Metronomicon is absolutely worth a look. I know I risk my indie card and lifetime subscription to Urban Outfitters by saying this, but I'm mostly unfamiliar with a lot of board games today. Obviously, I can't expect the Electronic Entertainment Expo to house the next Settlers of Catan or Cards Against Humanity. There was, however, a digital board game available to try out over at the Indie Megabooth section with a little gem called Sumer. It's a Kickstarter project up on early access through Steam right now, centered on managing competing resources to appease the gods. The game can be played with up to 4 people and can also be controlled by AI bots with adjustable difficulty. So yes, the game can absolutely be enjoyed solo while still giving it a good challenge. Sumer is inspired by European-style board games, as developer Jeffrey Soothers describes it, are usually associated with indirect conflict and economic strategy. Actions you take don't directly take something away from your opponents, but might help you build an engine that will make your future actions more efficient. Basically, the idea is that you jump up and down on the platform to have your men claim a space to harvest resources like barley and goats in order to give them to the almighty in various ways. The top section has a few empty slots that you'll have to fill up with 2 bonuses, one for having the most offered and the other for completing the offering before anyone else. One of the neat mechanics that mixes so well as both a video and a board game is how the challenge is racing and scrambling around against everyone trying to get the resource or offering that you want to give. You'll have to think fast and strategize what you want to do, otherwise you'll be left in the dust with something you didn't want or a wasted turn. The auction is a neat little minigame where you move your cursor left and right, and whoever gives the most by the end of the time gets the item. Here you can freak out your opponents to have them give up more resources than you intended, and you'll have plenty of goats left over to buy statues that can earn you extra points in the god's favor. I played the game in early access and found it to be in great shape with a good balance of AI difficulty without any bugs or frame rate drops that I noticed. The game is still in early access and is expected to leave that by the end of the year depending on how smooth development goes, and is right now taking time to balance out any AI issues. The only thing really holding it back for me is that this one gameplay mode seems to be it. There is some added incentive with difficulty settings with the AI, but I would have liked to see a little bit of variety in the game modes here. The main gameplay mode, however, is very addicting and is planned to have online multiplayer in the future when it's out of early access. The game will have randomized board layouts as well as customizable rule variants to help keep things interesting. And while I complain about the one type of game here, admittedly I did get my butt handed to me by the game's AI, so repeated playthroughs could help my bruised ego. If you have a couple of buddies or are a lone wolf and are looking for an interesting board game, Sumer is a fantastic mix of tabletop and video game, giving a fast-paced and smart experience.
Who among you best pleased Holy and Honor?
A little over a week ago, I got a chance to feature Natalie Lawhead's Tetrageddon, a strange collection of minigames throwing out all semblance of convention, reflecting on the art and game scenes in a loving tribute to Web 1.0. It's a collection that went on to earn at least an underground respect amongst the gaming community, snagging a spot on Rock Paper Shotgun's top 50 best free games on PC list, and going on to win the IGF's Nuovo Award in 2015. I bring this up not just to inform, but that game's attention and press that the community gave to her and her collection seemed to tie directly into her latest project, an interactive zine titled Everything is Going to Be Okay. This too is a collection of minigames that are loosely tied into one another, exploring a sort of mini-theme in each of them. They use a lot of the same animation and visual techniques of Tetrageddon, with the same goofy voices, surreal imagery, and sense of humor. In comparison to Tetrageddon, Everything is Going to Be Okay is a more deeply personal experience to its creator here. The overall theme of the project is how you're dealing with anxiety, depression, mental illness, insecurity, and suicidal thoughts, and how so much of society is very ill-equipped to help with that. The name of the game itself, Everything is Going to Be Okay, is a bit of an ironic one, as no matter what you tell yourself or how others try to help you with their nice sentiments, everything can't be okay.
I have lost my legs and can no longer move.
In the artist's statement provided with the game, Natalie explains that these are a collection of abstract life experiences or things that she's felt going through hard times. We see a lot of Natalie's frustrations as a creator shown off in some of the games, like the one where you're asked to draw a picture randomly for a person.
Thank you so much for doing this for free.
Her previous game, Tetrageddon, was very much art about art, commenting on the current state of the movement it's based on while giving a loving tribute to its lost form. This collection is at least partially a reaction to the underground success of Tetrageddon. There are elements of imposter syndrome here that reflect on her own self-esteem.
You don't have a career because you are too weird and artistic.
You get a sense of how personal a story this is to Natalie, with the idea that some of your creations are saved to your computer and can be shared on real life through Twitter. What you're feeling does go out there and create things for the world to see, but there's a sense that it doesn't really validate you as an artist, or simply you don't feel validated as an artist. Everything is Going to Be Okay is something that I found highly relatable. The minigame where you're desperately trying to think of something witty to say in a conversation is a big highlight here.
I'm just seeing blah 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 in the news. Yeah. You can't just change the topic. That's not how this works.
I can't tell you how many times I've felt exactly like that character. And speaking as somebody that creates little videos on YouTube, imposter syndrome is absolutely there. There are a lot of creators who I look up to and respect, but never really feel like I'm part of them. The collection right now is currently in beta and has a build currently available on GameJolt with a pay what you want price to it. I'd recommend giving it a try, and if you want to, support the game's final release. It's something I found myself relating to quite a bit, and you might too. About a year ago last month, the fine folks at Devolver Digital dropped a trailer for Slowclap's mystical, over-the-shoulder brawler Absolver. It featured an impressive visual style, a mysterious world to explore, and a very unique idea behind its combat. Basically, if Leon from Resident Evil 4 traded in his shotgun for a degree in martial arts. Oh, and the zombies also know Kung Fu. Okay, so maybe the Resident Evil 4 comparison is a bit tortured, but hey, at least it didn't say it's like Dark Souls! On the surface, it looked like an interesting approach, but it wasn't until I got my hands on it that the complexity of its combat system left me more impressed with the French studio's debut title. The story in the game is that you play behind the mask of a prospect, someone who, instead of getting a job like their parents keep telling them to, has taken a sacred vow and chosen to join the Absolvers, an elite group of combatants fighting to maintain stability in the world. The main juicy core of the game here is the combat system. Taken from actual martial arts, you'll be able to play several different styles of combat. For each attack, it discourages button mashing with a stamina meter and encourages better timing with a yellow highlight in your character, giving you an opportunity for a more powerful attack in your combo. If you hit it right on the mark, your attack is better. The combat styles and moves have various advantages with how you can parry and counter against your foes, which you master as you're playing the game. The most ambitious and exciting part of the combat system is how your individual moves are highly customizable, where you can select from different stances and moves for you to experiment with to find the right combo for you. As you play, you'll discover new moves to add to your roster by fighting different enemies and slowly learning them as you get hit by them, or you can find a mentor in the game where you can learn new moves and then from there use their combat deck. There's a lot of customizable moves you can use and a lot of experimentation that you can implement, where the player will have to figure out the right moveset to take a specific enemy down. Along with the mentor system, there's a big online play aspect to the game. You can choose to play co-op with another player to take out baddies, and you can openly fight against other players in the open world in a separate PvP mode or just on the battlefield. I've contacted Devolver and they described it as a bit like Journey, where players can play, and assuming they're connected online, other players from around the world can enter into their game passively. Admittedly, when I first played the game, I was a bit intimidated at first, but only at first. With some practice and experimentation, I would slowly learn to fight baddies like a pro. In PvP mode, I had another player who had just been introduced to the game playing against me, and we were both pretty neck and neck in terms of the skill, and I just barely won the match. It makes me understand why this strange hybrid of combat has turned a lot of heads in the gaming community, and consider this head properly turned. Absolver is an indie game you need to have on your radar and keep it there. It's to be released later this summer, and it's kind of a big deal. And that, as I say, is the first of what will be many videos on all the games that I got to play at E3. This video took a very long time to do and to research for, and the other videos may take some time as well. If you'd like to be notified on when the next video comes out, I've heard interesting things about the subscribe feature on YouTube. I'd look into that. A big thanks to all the developers and fine folks who helped in the creation of this video, and of course, thank you for watching.